I've rewritten this a dozen times, and every version starts with me trying to soften what happened, to make myself look a little less naive, a little less foolish. But no matter how I phrase it, the truth hangs over every sentence like a wet, heavy coat. Something broke long before I admitted it out loud. And even now, I'm not sure I'm ready to name exactly what it was. What I can tell you is that the night everything started felt absurdly peaceful. One of those evenings where life looks deceptively simple from the outside. There was warm light spilling from the kitchen, a soft playlist humming in the background, and the smell of roasted garlic drifting through our apartment. My partner, Daniel, was chopping tomatoes with the kind of focus that made me half smile every time I looked at him. He was always too serious about everything, cooking included. I remember sitting on the couch, laptop open, pretending to work. But really, I was watching him, studying him almost. Not in a romantic way, but in that quiet, unsettled way you look at someone when you're trying to figure out what changed and when you missed it. He glanced at me, offered a small smile, and said, "Dinner's almost ready, babe." It should have felt normal. It didn't. The unease wasn't loud. It was more like a gentle tapping on a closed door somewhere inside my chest. A feeling you can ignore if you breathe deeply enough. A feeling I had already been ignoring for weeks. Then my phone buzzed on the arm of the couch. A name lit up the screen. Lena. I froze. Here's the thing. Nothing about the message itself was suspicious. It was literally just, "Did you get home okay?" A friendly check-in. Caring, even. But the way my stomach dipped as I read it, that reaction told me more than the words did. I met Lena 3 months earlier. She was new at my office, the kind of person whose presence seemed to stretch into a room before she even walked into it. Not loud, not demanding, just noticeable. Sharp eyes, a soft voice, and an odd habit of listening like everything you said mattered. We weren't close, not really, or at least that's what I told myself. But she had a way of asking the kind of questions that made me feel seen in ways I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe that's why, even before anything happened, something had already begun shifting under my feet. I didn't respond to her text. I just flipped the phone screen down and tried to look casual about it. "Who was that?" Daniel asked, without looking up from the cutting board. "Work stuff," I said, too quickly. He hummed an acknowledgement. I don't know if he believed me. I don't know if I believed myself. Dinner was quiet, the kind of quiet where two people pretend everything's fine because the alternative is too heavy to acknowledge. He talked about a client meeting. I nodded at the right moments. I mentioned a project deadline. He offered automatic advice. We danced around each other like polite strangers. That used to bother me. Now it scared me. After dinner, he disappeared into the bedroom to take a call with his brother. I stayed behind, washing dishes I'd already rinsed twice. My thoughts drifted to Lena again. Her laugh, the way she always noticed when I was tired, the stupid internal warmth I got whenever she said my name. I wasn't supposed to feel any of that. I knew it. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself it didn't mean anything. I told myself a lot of things. The tapping in my chest got louder. Half an hour later, Daniel reappeared and casually said, "I might be working late tomorrow. Don't wait up." That sentence landed strangely. Not because it was unusual, he worked late plenty, but because something in his tone sounded practiced, like a line he had rehearsed. Or maybe I was just hypersensitive. Maybe I was the one creating ghosts where there weren't any. Maybe the guilt I didn't want to think about was making me paranoid. Still, something about the way he avoided my eyes made my breath hitch. We watched a show before bed, or at least pretended to. I couldn't remember a single scene. At some point, he leaned against me, and I felt nothing. Not comfort, not affection, not connection. Just the hollow, echoing awareness that something had slipped between us without either of us noticing. Distance. Later, when he fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing. I used to find that sound comforting, like proof that I wasn't alone. That night, it felt like a reminder of how far away he'd become, even lying right beside me. My phone buzzed again on the nightstand. Another message. From her. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. Instead, I closed my eyes and let the truth I wasn't ready to admit settle in the darkness around me. Something had already started. Something I didn't know how to stop. Something that would unravel everything if I let it. And the worst part? A part of me already had. The next morning, I woke up with that same heavy feeling lodged behind my ribs, the kind of weight you can't explain with words, only with a long exhale. Daniel was already up, shower running behind the closed bathroom door. I stared at the faint line of light under the door and tried to remember the last time we had woken up at the same moment, or even touched without thinking about it. When he finally walked out in a towel, hair dripping, he mumbled, "Morning," like a distant echo of the man I used to know. He kissed my cheek in a routine, automatic way. Not tender, not affectionate, mechanical, like checking off a box. I didn't comment. I just nodded and got dressed for work. During the drive, the city looked almost unreal. Too bright, too busy, too indifferent to what was happening quietly inside me. I kept replaying Lena's unopened messages in my mind. Twice at a red light, I thought about opening them. Twice, I put the phone back down. When I finally reached the office, she was there by the elevator, pressing the button with her usual calmness. She looked up, saw me, and her face lit up with a small smile. "You okay?" she asked the moment she saw me clearly. I hadn't said anything. I hadn't even greeted her yet. "Yeah," I lied, adjusting my bag on my shoulder. "Just tired." "You look like you didn't sleep." She said it softly, without judgment, just an observation, like noticing rain on someone's coat. The elevator doors dinged open, and we stepped inside. It was quiet between us, not awkward, just charged in a way I didn't know how to name. She didn't push, didn't pry, but something about the silence made my pulse pick up. When the doors opened on our floor, she touched my arm lightly and said, "If you ever want to talk, you know." I nodded, pretending her hand on my arm didn't linger in my mind long after she walked away. That was the first sign. Not because the interaction was inappropriate, it wasn't, but because of the way it made something inside me shift. The way I noticed her noticing me, the way that felt like a relief. Later that day, Daniel texted me, "Running late, don't wait up." I stared at the message longer than I should have, feeling a twinge of something sharp and sour. Annoyance? Suspicion? Maybe both. But I responded with, "Okay, be safe." And that was it. No kiss emoji, no love you, no warmth. Just two people coordinating schedules like roommates. The second sign. Around 5 p.m., Lena walked into my office doorway, holding 2 coffees. "You looked like you needed a refill," she said. "Wow," I laughed, taking one. "You read my mind." "I try," she teased gently, then leaned against the doorframe, folding her arms. "Rough day?" I hesitated. "Yeah, just things at home." Her expression softened instantly. "I get it. Relationships can be complicated." I swallowed. There was something in her tone, something that made me want to tell her everything, like she had already seen through the cracks I tried so hard to hide. Instead, I said, "It's nothing major." She didn't call me out on the lie. She just gave me that same patient look she always had, the one that made me feel dangerously understood. That evening, when I finally got home, the apartment was silent. Daniel's shoes weren't by the door. His jacket wasn't on the hook. The kitchen was clean, except for a post-it note on the counter. Leftover pasta in the fridge. I stared at it longer than necessary. It felt like a placeholder, like something you leave for someone you live with, not someone you love. The third sign. I heated the pasta, but it tasted like nothing. Halfway through picking at it, my phone buzzed. "Lena, you made it home, right?" I closed my eyes. She had asked me the same thing the night before. It should have been a harmless question, but the fact that she asked, and that I cared, and that Daniel hadn't even checked, it stirred something deep and restless in me. I typed, "Yeah, thanks," then deleted it. Typed again, "Yep, just got in." Deleted again. My fingers hovered for a long time before I finally wrote, "Yeah, appreciate you checking." Her reply came immediately. "Of course, you always seem like you're carrying more than you say." My throat tightened. I set the phone aside and forced myself to breathe. This wasn't anything. It couldn't be. I wouldn't let it be. But later, lying in bed alone with the dim glow of my phone lighting the room, I realized something quietly devastating. Lena wasn't crossing lines. I was. Not with words, not with actions, but with the way I found myself waiting for her messages, the way I felt when they didn't come, the way her attention filled a gap I didn't want to admit existed. When Daniel finally came home, long after midnight, he slipped into bed without waking me. Or maybe he thought I was asleep. Either way, he didn't touch me, didn't whisper a greeting, didn't even face me. I lay there, eyes open, listening to his breathing and feeling the quiet gulf widen between us inch by inch. And that's when the worst thought crossed my mind. Unwelcome, uninvited, but undeniably true. If something was happening, if something had already started, was it really only on my side? Mature, reflective, and restrained, conveying clarity of expression and emotional control when addressing difficult or personal topics, was about signs, subtle, deniable, easy to brush off. Part 3 is where those signs started turning into something I couldn't ignore anymore. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady and undeniable, like a drip that eventually floods a room. It started on a Thursday. Daniel had said again that he'd be working late. At that point, the phrase had lost meaning. It felt like a script he kept repeating, and I kept pretending to believe. I wasn't sure if he actually did work late every night. I wasn't sure if I cared. That was the part that scared me most. Not the possibility that he was lying, but the possibility that I was too tired to care if he was. That evening, I stayed at the office longer than usual, partly because I had tasks to finish, partly because going home to an empty apartment felt heavier than staying in front of a glowing screen. Most of the floor had cleared out. The quiet hum of the air conditioner and distant elevator dings blended into a kind of background numbness. Lena passed by my office around 7:30 p.m. She paused in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dim hallway lights. "You're still here," she said softly. I looked up, closing a document. "Yeah, trying to catch up." She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, leaning against the side of my desk. "You've been doing that a lot lately." There was no judgment in her voice, only concern, a kind of gentle awareness that disarmed me. She reached down, tapping lightly at the corner of my laptop. "You okay?" It was such a simple question, such a dangerous one. I exhaled slowly. Honestly, I'm not sure. She didn't push, she didn't prod. She just sat in the extra chair across from me and waited, like she knew the words would come if she stayed quiet long enough. And they did. Not everything, not the whole truth, but enough. Enough that she understood. Enough that her expression softened in a way that made my chest ache. It wasn't flirting. It wasn't confessional intimacy. It was something quieter. Two people carrying their own sadness in the same room, pretending they weren't inching closer without meaning to. We left the office at almost the same time. Elevator down, silence between us, something unspoken hanging in the air. When we reached the lobby, she gave me a small, sincere smile. "You deserve to be happy," she said. "Just whatever that means for you." I nodded, unable to trust myself to speak. When I got home, the apartment was dark again. Daniel hadn't texted. No late, no home soon, nothing. Just absence. I changed into sweatpants, made tea, and sat on the couch in silence. At some point, I picked up my phone and scrolled to our message thread. The last 3 texts were mine. All logistics, all unanswered. I told myself he was probably just tired, busy, distracted. People go through phases. Relationships go through phases. Maybe I was the one pulling away. Maybe I was projecting. I kept cycling through those thoughts until exhaustion pushed me toward bed. But when I walked into the bedroom, something made me stop. Daniel's closet door was half open. Not unusual. He was messy. But the blue shirt, the one he always wore on late nights, was hanging from the doorknob instead of on a hanger. As if he'd changed in a hurry, or as if he hadn't wanted to dig through the closet in the dark. I stared at it longer than I should have, noticing the faint scent of cologne lingering in the air. Not our usual laundry detergent, something sharper, newer. A strange feeling twisted in my stomach, an unsettling cocktail of suspicion and dread. I told myself it meant nothing. It meant nothing. It meant nothing. But the truth was starting to seep through the cracks. The real discovery didn't happen until 2 days later. Saturday morning, sunlight streaming through the blinds, Daniel in the kitchen making coffee like everything was perfectly normal. I walked in quietly, still groggy. He glanced at me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He slid a mug toward me. I took it. We stood there in a silence that wasn't comfortable, wasn't hostile, just hollow. Then his phone buzzed on the counter. He didn't move to pick it up immediately. That was unusual. Daniel was a phone addict. Notifications usually snapped him to attention. The screen lit up. And that was when I saw it. A name. A woman's name. One I didn't recognize. Followed by a preview of the message that froze me in place. Last night was incredible. Everything inside me went still. I didn't gasp, didn't speak, didn't cry. My body just shut down for a moment, like a system overload. The world dulled around me, sound muffled, colors dimmed. Daniel's fingers tightened slightly on the coffee mug he was holding, like he'd noticed the direction of my eyes. He stepped toward the phone too quickly, too defensively. "Hey," I started, but he cut me off. "It's not what you think." That sentence. The universal signal for guilt. My heart wasn't racing. It wasn't breaking. It was sinking, quietly, like a stone dropped into deep water. "Then what is it?" I asked. He opened his mouth, closed it again, took a breath. "I can explain," he said. But he didn't explain. And something inside me, something fragile, something I'd been balancing carefully for weeks, finally cracked. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even dramatic. It was just a quiet, devastating realization. If I had scrolled through his messages, if I had checked the timestamps, if I had asked more questions earlier, I would have found the truth sooner. Lena wasn't the only person I had been slowly drifting toward. Daniel had been drifting too, just in another direction. A direction he'd already acted on. A direction he hadn't intended for me to discover like this. He reached for my hand. "Please, just listen."
but all I could hear were the words on his screen echoing through my mind. Last night was incredible. And for the first time, something colder than betrayal, clarity. This wasn't the beginning. It wasn't even the middle. This was the part where the truth finally surfaced long after the damage had already been done.
The silence, after Daniel said, "It's not what you think," stretched between us like a tightrope, thin, tense, ready to snap if either of us breathed too hard. He kept his hand close to the phone, as if he could still hide what I'd already seen. "What is it, then?" I asked again, quieter this time. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was too calm, too steady, like someone speaking through a numb body. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, the same nervous gesture he used whenever he had to make excuses. "It's complicated." I let out a faint, humorless laugh. "Of course it is." He flinched. "I should have told you," he murmured. "About what?" My voice rose slightly. "Which part were you planning to tell me? The late nights? The messages? The incredible nights?" His eyes closed for a second, and guilt washed over his expression so clearly I felt sick. "Her name is Claire," he finally said. Hearing the name out loud hurt in a way I didn't expect. It made everything more real, more solid, more irreversible. "How long?" I whispered. Daniel leaned against the counter like he needed support. "A few months." My breath hitched. "Months?" "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said quickly, desperately. "It just did. Things between us were off, and I—" The word slammed into me harder than the confession itself. Things between us were off. The truth I'd been avoiding for weeks, maybe months, now felt like a blade twisted inside me. The distance hadn't been imagined. The quiet moments, the empty bed, the hollow routines, none of it had been paranoia. They were warnings I didn't want to see. But knowing that didn't make the pain any softer. "You could have talked to me," I said, gripping the back of a chair. "You could have said something, anything." "I tried," he said weakly. "When?" I demanded. "When did you try?" He opened his mouth, but no answer came. He looked down, shoulder sagging under the weight of what he wasn't saying. Because the truth was simple. He didn't try. He chose the escape instead of the effort. "And last night?" I pushed, even though I already knew the answer. He stared at the floor. "Yeah." The word punched the air out of my lungs. I stepped back, needing space, needing air, needing anything that wasn't him. Daniel reached toward me, voice cracking. "I swear, it didn't mean—" "Do not," I snapped, "finish that sentence." Something deep inside me, which had been fraying steadily for weeks, finally tore free. Not a scream, not a breakdown, just a quiet, steady anger that had been waiting patiently to surface. "This didn't happen because we were off, Daniel," I said. "Relationships go through rough patches. People get tired, stressed, distant. But cheating? That's a choice. You didn't slip and fall into someone else's bed." He looked like he'd been slapped. "I know," he whispered. "I know. I messed up, but I love you. I want to fix this." I stared at him, searching his face for any piece of the man I once trusted. Something to hold on to. I didn't find it. Instead, I found something else. Exhaustion. "You want to fix this?" I said slowly, "but you didn't stop. Not once." "It's not that simple," he argued. "It is," I said quietly. "It is that simple." He kept insisting, kept talking, kept trying to rewrite the narrative.
But his explanations were just noise, background static to the reality unfolding inside me. Because while he was scrambling for redemption, I was remembering every moment from the past few months. The empty bed, the late nights, the hollow smiles, the practiced excuses, the emotional distance he chalked up to stress. All signs pointing to a truth I had been unwilling to face. And underneath that truth, another one pulsed faintly. Lena. Not as a reason, not as an excuse, but as a contrast. While Daniel was disappearing, she was paying attention. While I was breaking quietly, she noticed. While he was drifting away, she stayed present. But her face, her texts, her quiet concern, none of that felt like the cause of anything. More like a mirror I hadn't been ready to look into. Daniel sat down at the kitchen table, head in his hands. I don't want to lose you. I could hear the trembling in his voice, but it didn't soften me. Not the way it once would have. You already did, I whispered. He looked up sharply, eyes wet. Don't say that. But I wasn't saying it to hurt him. I was saying it because it was true. The breaking point didn't happen in that moment. It had happened long before, quietly, like erosion. All today did was expose the cliff edge I'd been standing on without realizing. I walked past him, heading toward the bedroom. I need space, I said. I'm not doing this right now. Please, he called after me, voice cracking. Don't shut me out. I paused at the doorway, hand gripping the frame. I'm not shutting you out, I said. I'm stepping back from something you already stepped out of. His expression crumpled, but I couldn't look at him any longer. I closed the bedroom door. Not slammed, not locked, just closed. Inside, in the dim quiet, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't want to check it. I didn't want to check it. But the name on the screen made my breath catch in my throat. Lena. Are you home? Just thinking about you today. Hope you're okay. Not flirty, not inappropriate. Just warm, human. And for the first time, I realized Daniel's betrayal broke something in me. But it also revealed something else I had been too afraid to acknowledge. Something I would have to face next.
The morning after the confrontation felt strangely quiet. Too quiet, almost unnatural. The kind of silence you hear after a storm, where everything looks the same, but nothing is the same. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling a dull, lingering ache under my ribs. Not sharp, not dramatic, just heavy. Daniel hadn't come into the bedroom overnight. I didn't know where he'd slept. The couch, probably. A symbolic choice I hadn't asked him to make, but one that said enough on its own. When I finally left the bedroom, he was sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee, eyes red, fingers tapping nervously against the ceramic. He looked up the moment he heard me. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. The words triggered a wave of exhaustion so strong I had to lean against the doorframe for a second. Talking felt impossible. Thinking felt impossible. "I'm not ready," I said. He stood up as if he'd expected that answer. "I'll give you space, but please, I'm begging you, don't give up on us." I didn't respond, because I didn't have anything left to give. Not anger, not comfort, not certainty. Just emptiness. The next few days blurred together like smeared colors on a canvas. Messy, indistinct, emotionally exhausting. Daniel tried, I'll give him that. He texted me during work hours, he left notes on the fridge, he asked how my day was, offered to make dinner, suggested therapy. But all of it felt too late. Not because I didn't want effort, but because effort after damage feels like patching a sinking boat with duct tape. Meanwhile, at work, I tried to act normal, tried to focus, tried to keep my private disaster tucked behind a neutral expression. But Lena saw through me the moment I walked in on Monday. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said, quietly, as we waited for the elevator. "I haven't," I admitted. She pressed her lips together, concern clouding her expression. "Is it about him?" I didn't answer, but I didn't have to. She already knew. In the elevator, she reached out and gently touched my arm. Not romantic, not suggestive, just grounding. A human gesture. "If you need someone to talk to, I'm here." That was all she said. No questions, no pressure, just here. And somehow, that small, steady presence cracked something open in me, in a way Daniel's frantic apologies hadn't. That evening, when I got home, Daniel was waiting. "I talked to my brother," he said. "He recommended a counselor, someone really good. We could go together." "We could have gone months ago," I replied quietly. "I know," he whispered, "but I want to now." I sank onto the couch, feeling a tightness behind my eyes. "You don't get to want now what you didn't care about then." He sat across from me, elbows on his knees. "I care. I always cared. I was just stupid. I made mistakes. I was scared. I don't know. Everything felt wrong, and instead of fixing it, I ran." "Into someone else," I said. His jaw tightened with shame. "Yes." We sat in silence for a long moment. "Do you love her?" I asked. The question startled him. He shook his head immediately. "No, God, no. It wasn't like that." "Then what was it?" He rubbed his forehead with both hands. "It was easy. It was attention without responsibility. It didn't mean anything." I looked at him steadily. "It meant something to me." His face crumpled. "I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." Maybe he would. Maybe he wouldn't. Regret has a way of sounding sincere, even when it's temporary. I stood up. "I'm going to take a walk." "Please come back," he said, voice trembling. "I always come back," I replied automatically. But even as I said it, I knew the pattern was breaking. The walk didn't clear my head. Nothing was clear anymore. My thoughts looped in circles. Anger, hurt, guilt, fear, more hurt. Over and over. By the time I got home, the apartment was quiet again. Daniel's shoes were gone from the entryway. I glanced around and found a note on the counter. "Staying at my brother's tonight. I don't want to smother you. I love you. Please, don't give up." I didn't know how to feel. Relieved? Lonely? Guilty for the relief? Relieved for the loneliness? There wasn't a word for it. I collapsed onto the couch and stared at the ceiling until my phone buzzed. A message from Lena. "Just checking. Are you okay?" My throat tightened. I hesitated. Then I typed back, for the first time without second-guessing. "No, not really." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then again. Finally, "Do you want to talk? I'm here if you need me. No pressure." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't want to start something new. I didn't want to make impulsive decisions. I didn't want to treat her like an emotional safety net. But I also didn't want to keep drowning alone. So I typed, "Maybe." She replied instantly, "Whenever you're ready." Just that. Just enough. The next day, the fallout spread outward like ripples in a pond. Daniel texted me a long apology from his brother's house. I didn't respond. His sister called, saying she didn't know all the details but hoped we were okay.
My best friend called and asked if I wanted to stay with her for a while. Even my mother left a voicemail saying she had a feeling something was wrong. But the only person I actually wanted to talk to was the one person I wasn't sure I should. Lena. Not because she was a temptation, not because she was an escape, but because she felt safe, honest, present. And I hadn't felt any of those things in a long time. That night, as I lay in bed alone again, the full weight of everything finally settled on me. The relationship I'd spent years building had cracked open. The future I thought I had was suddenly uncertain. The version of myself I used to be felt impossibly far away. The fallout wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't a screaming match or a slammed door. It was quiet, slow, suffocating, and painfully real. And somewhere beneath all that wreckage was a tiny spark of something I didn't expect. Not hope, exactly, but the possibility of it. Something had ended, but something else, dangerous, delicate, and incomplete, was beginning to shift in the shadows. And for the first time, I realized. Daniel's betrayal broke something in me, but it also revealed something else I had been too afraid to acknowledge. Something I would have to face next.
I used to think breaking points were loud things. Moments of shouting, doors slamming, dramatic confrontations you could point to and say, there, that's when everything changed. But the real breaking point wasn't like that at all. It was quiet, almost gentle, like the soft snap of a thread you didn't realize had been holding everything together. By the time that weekend rolled around, the tension between Daniel and me had stretched thin enough to be transparent. We were going through the motions, sharing the same rooms, exchanging the same lines, performing the same routines, but none of it felt solid anymore. And underneath all of that hollow normalcy, there was the thing I wasn't saying, the thing I wouldn't let myself say. I didn't trust myself around Lena anymore. I shouldn't have gone to that work retreat. I could have said no. I could have made an excuse. I could have drawn a boundary like any decent partner would. But I didn't. Because part of me wanted to go, and another part of me wanted to see what would happen. The retreat was held at a small lakeside lodge our company rented once a year. The kind of place that looked idyllic on brochures. Tall pines, calm water, cabins with warm light spilling from their windows. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, the whole place hummed with the kind of nervous energy that comes from too many coworkers pretending to relax. And then Lena arrived. She walked up to the group in a soft gray sweater, her hair pulled up, a coffee in her hand. And when her eyes met mine, she smiled in a way that made everything else fade. Not a big smile, just that subtle, warm thing she did when she was happy to see someone. I felt it hit me in the chest like a small, unfair truth. "This place is gorgeous," she said. "Yeah," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It is." We weren't alone. There were 20 other people gathered around, forming little clusters, greeting each other. But somehow, the air tightened between us, like we were standing in a different room entirely. She nudged her shoulder lightly against mine. "You okay? You look tense." "I'm fine," I lied. She gave me one of those looks, soft, perceptive, impossible to hide from. "If you want to talk later, I'm around." And that was the moment. Not the dramatic confrontation, not the shouted confession. Just that. A simple offer. A safe place to land. A place that wasn't Daniel. We spent most of the day in workshops and group activities, but I was hyper-aware of where she was in the room at all times. Every laugh, every glance, every accidental brush of her hand against mine felt amplified, like someone had turned up the volume on something I should have kept muted. That evening, after dinner, the group migrated toward the fire pit outside. I sat on one of the benches, staring into the flames, trying to convince myself that this was all harmless, just friendly, temporary, nothing that would follow me home. Lena sat beside me. "You're quiet," she said. I exhaled slowly. "Just thinking." "About Daniel?" I looked at her sharply, but her face wasn't judgmental, just curious, concerned. She cared in a way that my chest hurt. "Yeah," I admitted. She pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them. "You two still feel off." "Worse than off," I said, before I could stop myself. "I don't know when it happened, but we're not us anymore." She didn't respond right away, just watched the flames crackle and spit sparks into the dark air. Then, softly, "Does he know you feel that way?" I shook my head. "I don't think I even fully knew it until recently." "And now?" she asked. "Now I don't know what I'm doing, or what I'm supposed to feel." She turned her head, studying me again, the way she always did, like she was reading the spaces between my sentences. And then, she said, almost in a whisper, "You don't have to pretend with me." My breath caught. There it was, the dangerous thing, the thing I had been tiptoeing around for weeks. She wasn't just a coworker, she wasn't just a friend. She was the person who made me feel seen, the person who noticed the cracks, the person who leaned into them instead of looking away. The air shifted between us, thick and electric. Someone from our team called out her name, breaking the moment. She stood, brushing pine needles from her jeans. "I'll see you later," she asked. I nodded. But the problem was that I didn't know what I meant by later. Later for another conversation? Later for another almost moment? Later for something neither of us should want. That night, lying in my cabin, the guilt finally hit. The sharp, cold kind that makes your stomach twist. I thought about Daniel at home, probably watching TV in the dark, probably assuming I was safe and steady and his. I thought about the promises we never said out loud but had lived by all these years. I thought about the version of me here. And then I thought about Lena. Her smile, her voice, the way she made the world feel bright in a way it hadn't in months. My phone buzzed. A message from her. "Can't sleep. You awake?" I stared at the screen for a long, breathless moment. And when I finally typed back, I crossed the line I had been pretending didn't exist. I wish I could say I hesitated longer, that I weighed the consequences, that I stared at the blinking cursor on my phone until logic pulled me back from the edge. But the truth is, I didn't. I typed back before I let myself think about it. "Yeah, I'm awake." 2 minutes passed, maybe less. But in that stretch of silence, I felt everything tipping, slowly, quietly, inevitably, like a glass nudged too close to the edge of a table. Then her reply came, "Can I come by?" My heart thudded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I sat up in bed staring at the message. It wasn't phrased casually. It wasn't a suggestion disguised as something harmless. It was a line drawn in clear, undeniable ink. And the worst part? I didn't feel fear. I felt relief. Like she had finally spoken the thing I'd been too cowardly to say. I typed back one word. "Yeah." Seconds later, I deleted it. Rewrote it. Deleted it again. I wanted to pretend I wrestled with it, but the struggle was thin and half-hearted. Eventually, I sent, "Sure, cabin 4." The 3 dots on her end appeared immediately. "Be there in a minute." And just like that,
The line wasn't ahead of me anymore. It was under my feet. I sat on the edge of the bed, palms damp, every nerve buzzing. The cabin felt too small, too warm, too private. Outside, footsteps crunched in the gravel walkway. I stood up so fast the mattress groaned in protest. A soft knock. 3 quiet taps. I opened the door. There she was, Lena, wrapped in a shawl, hair a little messy from the wind, eyes wide, like she'd run through every possible scenario on the walkover and still hadn't settled on one. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other, breathing the same cold night air. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey," I echoed. I stepped aside. She entered. And then the door closed behind her, sealing us inside the wrong place at the wrong time with all the wrong feelings we'd been pretending not to have. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was charged, like the air right before lightning hits. She sat on the small bench by the window. I stayed by the foot of the bed. The space between us felt like a living thing, heavy, waiting. "I couldn't sleep," she said softly. "I know the feeling." She glanced at me, her expression shifting into something tender, almost painful. "You were quiet today. I could tell something was bothering you. I didn't want to make things weird." "It's already weird," she said, almost laughing. "Isn't it?" I echoed. She looked down at her hands. "I don't want to be the reason anything in your life gets messed up." "You're not," I said. She lifted her eyes, searching my face for a lie. I wasn't sure what she found. "You care about him," she said. "I do." I swallowed. "But I'm not happy. Not anymore." Her breath hitched, barely perceptible, but there. "And with me?" I didn't answer immediately. I didn't want to say something reckless. I didn't want to say something cruel. But the truth pushed itself up my throat anyway. "With you, I don't feel numb." Her lips parted. A soft, involuntary reaction. A reaction that told me she had been waiting, hoping for that exact confession. And that was the moment everything inside me cracked. She stood up slowly and crossed the small room until she was standing right in front of me, close enough that I could smell the faint lavender of her shampoo, close enough that I could see the nervous tremble in her fingers. "You don't have to do anything," she whispered. "I know." Her eyes searched mine. "Then what do you want?" I should have stepped back. I should have said something responsible. I should have remembered Daniel. I should have remembered who I used to be. Instead, I said the truest, most dangerous thing circling inside me. "I want you to stay." Her breath caught. She lifted her hand, slowly, so gently, and let her fingers brush the side of my jaw. The touch was feather-light, almost questioning. I didn't pull away. She leaned in, her forehead resting against mine. Our breaths tangled. My heart hammered against my ribs. "You sure?" she whispered. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm not sure about anything anymore." Her lips curved into the smallest, saddest smile. And then she kissed me. It wasn't a dramatic, sweeping kiss. It wasn't rushed or urgent. It was soft, hesitant, like she was giving me one last chance to pull away. I didn't. When her hand slid to the back of my neck and she deepened the kiss, something inside me surrendered. Something I had been gripping tightly out of obligation, fear, and a version of loyalty I had already stopped living up to. I kissed her back, fully, deliberately. And in that moment, the line wasn't just crossed. It disappeared entirely. Later, after what felt like both seconds and hours, we sat side by side on the bed. the air around us thick with things we couldn't take back. "We can't pretend this didn't happen," she said quietly. "I know. What now?" I didn't have an answer. Not for her, not for myself, not for the life I had just fractured with a single choice. All I knew was this: everything was going to change, and there was no clean way back.
Mature, reflective, and restrained, conveying clarity of expression and emotional control when addressing difficult or personal topics. The drive home from the retreat felt like waking up from anesthesia, slow, disoriented, thick with the remnants of something I couldn't name out loud. The sun was too bright, the highway too straight, the silence inside my car too sharp. It felt like the world should have changed in some visible way, like the sky should look different after you cross a line you can't uncross. But everything looked the same. Only I wasn't. I kept replaying the night, flashes of Lena's voice, her breath against my skin, the way she whispered my name like it meant something. Every time the memory surged up, guilt followed like a shadow, heavy, inescapable. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from Daniel. "Miss you. Can't wait to see you." My stomach twisted so hard I had to pull off at the next exit. I sat in the parking lot of some random gas station, forehead pressed against the steering wheel. His message was so normal, so trusting. He had no idea what I had done, no idea what version of me was on the other end of his words. I typed back, "Be home soon," then turned the phone over so I wouldn't have to see it anymore. The lie tasted bitter. When I finally walked through the front door, Daniel met me in the hallway, arms wrapping around me before I could drop my bag. "I missed you," he said it softly, without theatrics, just honest affection. The kind that used to feel like home. Now, it felt like a weight. I hugged him back, but the motion felt stiff, like my body didn't know how to navigate two truths at once: the history we shared and the secret I carried. He didn't seem to notice, or maybe he didn't want to. "How was it?" he asked. "Did you have fun?" Fun. The word landed strangely. "Yeah," I said, careful. "It was fine." He smiled. "Good. You needed the break." I nodded, wishing he wouldn't look at me with so much warmth, because that warmth hurt more than anger ever could. That night, everything Daniel did felt magnified by guilt. His laugh during a movie we barely watched, the way she squeezed my hand when he got up to grab water, the small kiss he pressed to the top of my head before bed. None of it felt unfamiliar, but all of it felt wrong now. Like I didn't deserve any of it. Later, when he fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling again. Only this time, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. The consequences weren't loud yet, but I could feel them simmering just beneath the surface. My phone buzzed. A message. Of course it was her. "Made it home. Thinking about you." My heart jumped, and then sank. I shouldn't have replied. I knew that. But the ache to feel something, anything other than guilt, won. "Thinking about you too." The three dots didn't appear. She didn't reply. And somehow, that hurt more than it should have. The next morning at work, everything felt off-kilter. People greeted me, I smiled back. Meetings happened, I contributed. Emails pinged, I answered. All while a low buzz of anxiety sat in my chest. When I passed by the break room, Lena was inside, pouring coffee. She looked up as the door swung open. For a moment, neither of us moved. She looked different, less sure, more cautious, like she was trying to measure the space between us and what it meant now. "Morning," she said, voice soft, controlled. "Morning." We weren't alone. Another coworker was organizing mugs, so the conversation stayed painfully surface level.
"How was your drive?" she asked. "Long," I said. "You get some rest?" "Not much." "Same." We stood there, pretending to talk about nothing, while everything we weren't saying pulsed between us. When the coworker finally left, Lena's shoulders dropped just a little. She didn't look at me right away. "I didn't know what to text back last night," she said. "You don't owe me anything." "That's not why," she said. I waited. She finally met my eyes. "I didn't want to make things harder for you," she said. A breath caught in my throat. "It's already hard." "I know." Silence. She took a small step closer, but not enough to touch, not enough to cross another line, just enough to show she wanted to. "What we did," she began, voice trembling slightly. "I don't regret it, but I'm scared, for both of us." "Me too." "And Daniel," her voice softened even more, "he doesn't deserve to be blindsided." I swallowed, hard. "I know." "So what happens now?" she asked. The question echoed the one she'd asked that night on the bed. Only now it held more weight, more consequence. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm trying to figure that out." She nodded slowly, like she had expected that answer. Before she could respond, someone else walked into the break room. She stepped back immediately, putting physical distance between us as if she was afraid our closeness was visible. Maybe it was. As she walked past me toward the door, she murmured just loud enough for me to hear. "Just don't pretend I don't matter." It wasn't a demand. It wasn't pressure. It was a quiet plea. A plea wrapped in guilt, longing, fear, and everything we had started without meaning to. When she left, I stood there gripping the counter, breathing shallowly, the consequences finally beginning to unfold in real time. Because pretending nothing had changed was no longer an option. Something was going to break. Something was going to hurt. And the longer I waited to face it, the worse it would become.
Unraveling doesn't happen all at once. It happens in threads. A look held too long. A lie told too easily. A moment you can't explain, followed by another you tried to ignore. By the end of that week, my life had become a careful balancing act of small, quiet deceptions. Nothing dramatic, nothing explosive, just subtle shifts that felt harmless in isolation, but together they formed a truth I didn't want to face. The morning after the retreat, I left for work earlier than usual. I told Daniel I had a meeting. I didn't. I just needed space. Space from his trust, from my guilt, from the knot twisting in my stomach. When I walked into the office, Lena wasn't at her desk yet. Her absence felt too loud, too noticeable. I hated how much I cared, and I hated pretending I didn't. Around 9, she finally arrived. Our eyes met for half a second, just long enough for my chest to tighten before she looked away, moving carefully, deliberately, like someone walking across thin ice. I understood. We were both terrified of cracking the surface. At lunch, I stayed in my office, pretending to read emails I couldn't focus on. Every time footsteps passed the door, my heart jumped. When a soft knock finally came, I didn't have to wonder who it was. "Come in," I said. Lena slipped inside and closed the door behind her, quietly, carefully, like secrecy was now second nature. She stood there, hands folded in front of her, not quite looking at me. "Are we okay?" she asked. The question hit harder than it should have. "I don't know," I said honestly. She nodded, as if she expected that, or feared it. "I'm not trying to push you," she said. "I just don't want you to regret that night." I stood up, the distance between us suddenly unbearable. "I don't regret it." "Then why do you look like you're falling apart?" "Because I am." Her face softened with something that looked like pain. "I'm not trying to take anything from you. I know.
I'm not trying to ruin your relationship." "I know." "Then what are you doing?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. I didn't even have the beginning of one. Not when she was looking at me like that. Not when my heart pulled toward her, even as my mind screamed that this was wrong. "But you matter," I said quietly. "I don't want to pretend you don't." Her breath caught, the faintest tremble passing across her expression. "That's all I needed to hear," she said, before slipping out the door. She didn't ask for more. She didn't push. She didn't cling. And somehow, that made me want her even more. That evening, when I got home, Daniel greeted me with a smile that made my throat tighten. "We ordered from that Thai place you like," he said. "Figured you'd be tired." The effort he put into caring for me felt like a punch to the chest. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. He noticed, I could tell. His eyes lingered on me a little too long, his brow creasing subtly. But he didn't ask. He didn't push. He trusted me. And trust is a fragile, terrible thing to break. That night, after he fell asleep, I went to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. I didn't look like the kind of person who tore their own life apart. I looked normal, ordinary, boring even. But inside, everything was cracking. I splashed water on my face, breathing slowly, trying to calm the storm. My phone buzzed. A message. From her. "Are you okay?" Just 3 words. But they pierced straight through me. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, because I wanted to too much. I turned off my phone and lay beside Daniel, staring at the ceiling again. The silence felt heavier than ever. By Friday, the cracks grew deeper. At work, Lena avoided me completely. Not coldly, not resentfully, just carefully, protectively. Every time I passed her, I felt something inside me twist. I kept wondering if I had already lost something I never fully had. Around 3 in the afternoon, she walked into a meeting room for a presentation. I was already inside. Our eyes met only for a brief moment, and something in that glance felt final, like a quiet decision had been made. She sat at the far end of the table. She didn't look at me again. Not once. By the time the meeting ended, I felt physically sick. This was the unraveling. Not the chaos, not the explosion. The quiet coming apart of 2 lives that no longer fit together the way they used to. After work, Daniel texted, "Do you want to go out tonight?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then typed, "Sure." Maybe I was trying to hold on to something slipping through my fingers. Maybe I was trying to prove to myself that I could still be the person he thought I was. Or maybe I was just tired of the guilt eating me from the inside. When we sat across from each other at a small Italian restaurant, candlelight flickering between us, he reached across the table for my hand. I let him take it. But it felt like holding something fragile I didn't deserve. He smiled. "I love nights like this." And that was the moment something inside me broke in a new way. Because I realized with a terrible clarity that I couldn't keep pretending this was sustainable. Not with him, not with her, not with myself. Something had to give. And it was only a matter of time before it did.
In the end, it didn't explode so much as it collapsed. There was no screaming match, no dramatic confrontation, no shattered glass or slammed doors, just a quiet, devastating shift. A realization that had been building for weeks finally settling into something undeniable. The breaking wasn't loud. It was honest. And honesty, I learned, can ruin just as thoroughly as betrayal. It happened on a Sunday morning, one of those soft gray ones where everything feels muted. Daniel and I were in the kitchen making pancakes, a ritual we had built long before things started to crack. He was humming under his breath, batter dripping from the ladle in slow ribbons. It was a familiar scene. Too familiar. The kind of normalcy that feels like a lie once you've stepped outside of it. As I watched him flip the pancakes, something in my chest twisted. All the guilt I'd been swallowing for weeks surged up, heavy and suffocating. And for the first time, instead of pushing it down, I let it rise. "Daniel," I said, voice low. He turned, spatula in hand. "Yeah? We need to talk." He blinked, confused but calm. "Okay? About what?" I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. I didn't want them to be, but they were. "I haven't been honest with you." Silence. Heavy, immediate. He set the spatula down slowly. "What do you mean?" My throat closed. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. I wanted to rewind time to unmake every choice that led here. But the truth was pushing through, relentless. "There's someone at work," I said. "Lena." His face didn't change at first, not visibly. But his eyes did, subtly, like a light flickering. "What about her?" he asked, carefully, too carefully. I swallowed hard. Something happened. The words hung between us, poisonous and jagged. He didn't speak, didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at me like he was trying to understand a language he'd never learned. "When?" he finally asked, voice thin. "The retreat," I said, and after. A slow, fragile inhale. His shoulders rose, then fell, like the weight of everything I had just confessed was settling onto his bones. "So, you cheated," he said, not as a question. I closed my eyes. Yes. Silence again, a long one. The kind that feels like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for something to give way. When he finally spoke, it wasn't angry, it was worse. Why? There it was. The question I didn't want to answer. The one I didn't have a clean explanation for. I don't know," I said. "I felt disconnected, lost. And she made me feel seen again. It wasn't planned, it wasn't enough," he said sharply, stepping back like my words physically hit him. "Just stop." He rubbed his forehead, eyes tight, like he was fighting off a wave of nausea or grief or both. "Do you love her?" he asked. The question hit me like a slap. "No," I said quickly, "it's not about that." "But you wanted her?" "Yes," I whispered. "And you didn't want me?" My voice cracked. "I did. I do. It's just complicated." He laughed, a broken, humorless sound. "Complicated? Right." He walked away from the counter and leaned against the kitchen island, hands gripping the edge. His knuckles were white. "You should have told me," he said. "You should have said you were unhappy. I didn't know how." "You didn't need a perfect explanation," he snapped. "You just needed honesty. Instead, you gave it to someone else." My chest tightened. "I'm sorry." "I know," he said, barely audible. "But that doesn't fix it." There wasn't a dramatic ending. No storming out, no shouting. Just exhaustion settling over both of us like dust. He told me he needed space. I packed a bag. He didn't stop me. He didn't ask where I was going. He just stood in the doorway, arms crossed over his chest, eyes red but dry. Before I left, he said quietly, "I hope she was worth it." The worst part? She wasn't the point. Not really. The point was that something inside of me had been broken long before Lena ever came into the picture. I didn't want to face it, so I reached for the closest person who made me alive again. The betrayal wasn't the night I crossed the line. It was all the moments before it when I knew something was wrong and did nothing about it. I checked into a hotel that night. The room felt sterile and unfamiliar,
but honest in a way my home no longer was. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. No messages. Not from Daniel. Not from Lena. The space between everything I had been and everything I now was felt enormous. I finally texted her. I told him. A minute later, her reply came. "How are you?" Not, "What does this mean for us?" Not, "Are we together now?" Just that. A simple, human one. I don't know, I wrote back. 3 dots. Disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "I'm here if you need me." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, because I needed the silence. I needed to sit with the consequences I had created. I needed to understand the damage before moving toward anything else. As the hours passed, loneliness settled beside me on the bed. But for once, it felt like a companion I deserved. This wasn't the end I wanted, but it was the end I earned. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't running from the truth. I was sitting with it, letting it break me, letting it remake me, letting it be the story it was always going to become.